Why everyone should have a creative well. Yesterday I talked about my creative well, and I realized that there's some creative people that, like Quentin Tarantino for one, is someone who states that he doesn't watch any films as he's making a film. And there's other creative people that I've heard the same thing, that they don't like to read or see what's going on in the current like creative atmosphere that they're in while they're making. I don't agree with that, and I'm going to give you some reasons why I think you should have a creative well, and the kind of things you should factor in into your creative well as your to read pile. So like I said yesterday, some of it is inspirational, some of it's going to make you want to make things, and that's something that I really take to heart, because I think of someone like Peter Laird. I'm a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. For anyone who's been watching the channel for a while, you guys know that, and it's always broken my heart because Peter Laird is a strong cartoonist, and I think he resembles more of a Kirby-esque kind of artist than someone like Kevin Eastman. Peter Laird never really made that many comics, whereas Kevin Eastman became a cartoonist, and he's made a lot of different comics with a lot of different groups and told a lot of different stories, especially with his time in heavy metal. But Peter Laird became kind of soured by the comic book industry, and so then he stopped making comic books. And it's sad to see someone who wanted nothing more in life than to make comics to get to a point where he can publish a comic book every month and not care and just do it for the love of doing it. But he's become, he's falling out of love with comics. Number two, like I said, a lot of times my creative well has information in there that's going to tell me basically like how to structure a story, how to make characters pop. Like, I learned so much from different artists because every artist has a strong point and they lean on it, and so you kind of try to learn from that aspect, that thing that they do really well, and try to pull that into your work and do your rendition of it, like a potluck of shit that you consumed and you seen, and the way you understood it and the way you liked it, disliked it, because even stories sometimes that I write is my rendition of a story that I saw that I didn't like, and my argument of what would have been better of that story. And especially like reading contemporary stuff, so this is more for like your to read pile, things that you should be reading and consuming to try to factor into your work. Contemporary stuff, because art is a form of communication. As much as we try to make it seem like it's just something that we do for us, by showing it to other people, we're trying to communicate what this energy was, what this emotion was, what this thought was. We try to share that with the community. Because it's a form of communication, communication is always changing. Language is always getting updated. There's always new shorthands, slangs, and so on and so forth. There's new ways of telling jokes. There's things that are funny, things that are taboo, things that you don't say anymore. And the language is always updating. And if you're not reading the current like text and seeing the current memes and getting the current jokes, you're not going to know how to communicate with people what you're trying to tell them. Or you might not know what you're trying to subvert and the way you're trying to subvert it. A lack of context for anything, I think, is just bad. And so understanding the context and where you're making your art, because your art is not devoided of like all this shit that happens around it in the world, right? It's a product of that thing. And so when people try to make art and they try to assume that their art is outside of everything, I think they're doing themselves a disservice. You should have a creative well. One, to keep your fire going, but two, as well, to just learn, right? Because we're a student of the craft, right? You're trying to progress, and this kind of thing is almost like a lifelong journey. There's never the end where you become the master of. It's never like that, right? Like, this thing is forever evolving and growing. And maybe for a time or two you might be leading the charge, but you're always going to be learning from other folks. That's why it's also good to have that creative well that has more contemporary things. But as well, there's things to learn from the fundamentals, and that should, like my pile yesterday that I showed off was, the stuff that I continuously go back to, right? Like the base of my well. But then there's my to read pile that has things that I've never seen, never read, that is the continuation of the art. And lastly, the last thing I want to touch on this topic is why you should also share your creative well. You should tell people what's in there. What are your fundamentals, right? Like, once again, my fundamentals are what are my Frank Miller comics. They're my TMNT original run, right? These are like my day-to-day I will read, right? All my Matt Groening comics, my Daniel Klaus, those are my fundamentals. Those are the ones I go back to and I get the nuts and bolts. But then beyond that, I have my to read pile That's stuff that I wouldn't normally read. And a lot of that stuff is stuff that filters in through other people's creative wells. An example of this is the homie Jimmy let me borrow a comic book called Lock and Key. Something that when I saw the art, I was like, this is not something I would have necessarily picked up, but the homie recommended it, so I picked it up. I recommended my TMNT Ultimate Collection Volume 1, so I shot him that. And I read Lock and Key, and I enjoyed it. It was a good read. I liked a lot about the story structure. The art I did not like, but I liked the story. And then the homie Aaron had this Ninja Turtle comics here. Bam! And he was like, you know what, I'm not doing anything with it. Not really a big TMNT fan. Sharing his comic book wealth and was like, would you like it? He's like, I know you're downsizing, bro, but you want it? And a TMNT junkie that I am, I couldn't say no, so I took it. And lo and behold, in this comic book, there's a comic by Kevin Eastman that I never read called the 49th Street Stompers. I had to do a little research on it, so here goes some information on that. And that's something that I would have never read if the homie wasn't willing to share the shit he has. As artists, we should always be talking to each other and trying to give each other, because like the comics that I'm getting rid of, they don't really mean nothing to me, but they might mean the world to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, some of these issues might be the issues that they were missing, that hit like a nostalgic kind of like pressure point for them, but it's not doing you any good, right? Prime example, once again, the homie, he doesn't need this, and I am blown away. I reread 49th Street Stompers. I went on a deep dive of like, where did this come from? So how many more Kevin Eastman comic books from TMNT are just, you know, floating on the universe that I haven't read yet? And that's because the homie shared his creative well. And when you make your creative well, you really want to factor in two things depending upon kind of the creative field you're in, but it should be, how does this help you artistically? How does this help you motivationally? And then beyond that, last thing, please share your creative well with other people. Let them get a sip of the shit that you have. You don't know how that's going to apply to you. And like I said, just filtering new ideas and new perspective is the way we get to new things. And that's going to help your art grow. That's all I got for you guys today, man. So go make a creative well because you need it. Once again, my name is Rich. I publish a comic book zine anthology called Furrow Comics. Link will be in the show notes for my big cartel shop where you can pick that up. Beyond that, like, share, and subscribe. Lates.